أنت ربي ذو الجلال والإكرام يا إلهي.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Alhamdulillah. So we're continuing in our reading of Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, 40 essential, absolutely essential, foundational teachings, words, statements of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially as they revolve around the themes of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, the way the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam defined them in the second hadith. So, today we're going to focus on 3 hadith, hadith number 6, 11, and 30. If anyone wants to follow along. At the end of this course, we will have gone through all of the ahadith. But, after having done this a few times now, I've realized that a lot of these ahadith complement each other. And it's better in individual sessions to talk about the ahadith that complement each other immediately, and then go on each session like that. So hadith number 6, hadith number 11, and hadith number 30 all complement each other very, very well in talking about the a very, very central, important premise of Islam, and that is halal and haram, permissibility and impermissibility, right? So we're going to look at that in a very comprehensive way. And the first hadith is hadith number 6. And this is a very well-known hadith, sahih hadith narrated by multiple companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In this particular nusakh, it's narrated by Abdullah ibn Iman ibn Bashir radiyallahu anhu, where he says that سمعت Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam يقول إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين. We're going to read the hadith, translate it, and then we're going to go through it bit by bit, explaining, right? Indeed, verily, halal is clear and haram is clear, right? وبينهما أمور مشتبهات. And between these two things, there's a gray area, right? لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. Most people don't know what the right answer is in this gray area. Okay? كثير من الناس. Most people. Okay? So then he says, من اتقى الشبهات فمن اتقى الشبهات استبرأ لدينه وعرضه. So if you stay away from this gray area, you've protected your religion and your dignity. And then he says, ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام كالراعي يرعى حول الحمام. And if you fall into the gray area, if you start to do things that are doubtful, they're not exactly clearly halal or clearly haram, they're somewhere in between. Okay, it's a gray area. If you fall into this habit of starting to do these things a lot, you'll eventually fall into haram. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives a metaphor, كَالرَّاعِي يَرْعَى حَوْلَ الْحِمَامِ. As a shepherd, right, grazes his sheep near the boundaries of a king's land, okay? يُوشِكُ أَنْ يَرْتَعَ فِيهِ. Eventually, the sheep will eat from the king's land. I'll explain what this means here in a second, right? And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gives another metaphor, right? He says, أَلَا وَإِنَّ لِكُلِّ مَلَكٍ حِمَامٍ. Isn't it that every king has protected boundaries, right? أَلَا وَإِنَّ حِمَ اللَّهِ مَحَارِمُ. And isn't that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the protected boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the things that He made haram. Again, we're going to go through this bit by bit. And then he says, this is all related, even though it doesn't seem exactly at first that it's related. It's all related, right? ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب. And isn't it that there's a morsel of flesh, right, in the body of the human being? And if this morsel of flesh is sound, the whole body is sound. But if the morsel of flesh is corrupt, the whole body becomes corrupt. Indeed, is it not the heart, right? Every single component of this hadith, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ talks about permissibility and impermissibility, the gray area in between, the metaphor of a shepherd herding his sheep, right? The metaphor of a king having boundaries, and the metaphor of the human heart, the spiritual heart and the human heart, right? They're all related. This in the Arabic language is called, actually in Balagha, it's called Majazul Murakkab. It's a metaphor that is compounded on itself, right? And so every single one of the components of this metaphor is related to the component that comes after it. But let's go back through it bit by bit so we understand every individual word of the hadith, right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, "Inna al-halal," indeed very halal. Halal are the things that are permissible. Bayyin. Bayyina is something that's very clear, right? Very obvious, right? There's no question about it, there's no doubt about it. Tibyana, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Quran that the Quran is tibyana li kulli shay, right? It explains everything, right? It makes everything very clear, right? Someone who's very familiar with the Quran feels like they have clarity in life, right? That's something that the Quran does. The word tibyan is used, which also comes from bayyin, right? So clear, right? There's no doubt about it. وَإِنَّ الْحَرَامْ bayyin. And indeed, the things that are not permissible are very clear. وَبَيْنَهُمَا. Between these two things, umur, are other things, mushtabihat. The word mushtabihat means not clear, the opposite of bayyin. So you have this spectrum of halal and you have this spectrum of haram. In between this is this gray area and it's not clear, right? And the Prophet says most people don't know not what the gray area is. He's saying most people don't know what the right answer is in regards to the gray area, okay? See, the majority of people will always be dealing with gray area issues, okay? It's not clear. Is this really halal? We're going to talk about some examples here in a minute, right? Is this haram or is it partly halal, partly haram? What is it, you know? Actually, most of our daily life falls into that category. There's very few things where we, every day when we're going through life, when we're at work, we're making shopping decisions, you know, there's very few things that we're just like, yeah, clear, obviously, 100%. You know, a lot of the time, we're dealing with issues that, actually, I'm not sure. Like when you say that to yourself, it's not really sure. That's what the umur mushtabihat is, right? And then he says, but if you're careful, mani taqa. The word taqa here means being careful, right? Same word as taqwa, right? Piety, right? The idea that being careful, right, and piety are essentially the same thing. One time, one companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asked another companion, what is taqwa? And he said, have you ever walked through a field full of thorns and you had to be careful where you put your foot, you know, and where you put your clothes, and you have to hold on to your clothes so it doesn't hit this and it doesn't hit that, right? That is what taqwa is, right? So the word mani taqa, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is saying, whoever is careful about the gray area, right? It can also mean shield, right? Wiqaya in the Arabic language means shield. Like, so if you have like a force field around you, if you have a shield around you against falling into the gray area. Some ulama talk about putting a barrier between you and the gray area. Okay, we'll get to that here in a second, right? If you do that, then istabara lidinihi wa irdi. Then you have claimed innocence, or you have protected your religion and your dignity. Isn't that interesting? Dignity, right? The Prophet says dignity, right? He's linking the idea of honor and dignity to the degree in which you stay clear of things that are not clear, right? And actually, we have maqasid in our religion. What are maqasid? Someone tell me what maqasid are. Who's heard of the word maqasid, right?
Objectives.
Objectives, right? Okay? Maqsad is an objective, maqasid is the plural, objectives. Who knows what the maqasid of Islam are? What are the main goals and objectives of Islam? There's actually five or six that the scholars mentioned. Who's heard of them? The main goals and objectives of Islam, right? Imam al-Shaltabi, about 300-400 years after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, was the first to really write about this. But the main goals and objectives of Islam are first and foremost the preservation of religion. Okay, preserving religion is a main goal and objective of Islam. Preserving life, a main goal and objective of Islam. Okay, so if you're about to die, the only thing you can do to survive is eat a little bit of meat that's not halal, you're allowed to do it because preserving life is a main goal and objective of Islam, right? Preserving intellect, okay, is a main goal and objective of Islam. Preserving your health, that's 4, right? Main goal and objective of Islam. Actually, intellect and health kind of fall together. Preserving family and wealth is a main goal and objective of Islam. And the last one that the scholars mention is that preserving your dignity, right? Not doing things that make your dignity fall into question, your honor fall into question, your trustworthiness fall into question, right? Your reputation fall into question. Staying away from those things is also from the maqasid of the Sharia, the main goals and objectives of Sharia. So whoever stays away from the gray area has protected his religion and his dignity. And whoever falls into the gray area eventually falls into haram, right? Now, it's hard to understand what this means, right? So the Prophet gives a metaphor, right? He gives a metaphor. He says it's kind of like this. Imagine a shepherd. Now, why does the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ use the metaphor of a shepherd? One, everyone at that time is familiar with a shepherd, but the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also was a shepherd when he was a child. When he was young, that was his job. That was his first job. Did you all know that? The first job of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was to shepherd sheep, right? And he says actually all the prophets used to learn how to shepherd sheep. Why? Why is it important for a prophet to know how to shepherd sheep? Why is that important for a prophet?
Because the animals are going in different directions.
Yeah. It's hard to control the animals, right? The sheep, all they care about is eating, right? They don't see the bigger objective that there's a wolf, right? That's trying to eat them, right? And all they want to do is eat. Well, human beings, all they want to do is play, enjoy, right? They don't see that there's a shaitan that's trying to get to them, right? And so being a shepherd is actually a very important training for a prophet. Moses was a shepherd. Abraham was a shepherd. Muhammad was a shepherd. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam jami'an. So all of the prophets were shepherds, right? And so they're very familiar with this metaphor. Now the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wants to give this metaphor so we understand what it means to stay away from the gray area, right? He says it's like a shepherd that's herding sheep. What do the sheep do, right? They eat a little bit here, they eat a little bit here. Do the sheep see a line that says don't go past this line? No, right? They just keep eating, right? And the Prophet says they will eat next to a hima of a king. Now, back then, kings, they used to have markers of their land, right? And their land used to be protected. And they wouldn't allow just any old shepherd to come into their land to herd their sheep, because the shepherds would want their sheep to go eat in that land because the grass is really good, it's taken care of and everything, but the king protects it, right? And he punishes anyone who goes near that line. He punishes anyone who goes near that line. So Rasulullah ﷺ says, you know what this is like? This is like a shepherd that takes his sheep and gets really, really close to that line they're not supposed to go past. Is it easy to control your sheep at that point? At some point they're going to cross that line and eat some of the grass that they're not supposed to eat, right? So the Prophet says, yushiku, at any one moment, those sheep might fall into that land where they're not supposed to go and start eating. Then who's to blame? The sheep or the shepherd? The shepherd, right? The shepherd, right? And in a sense, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is saying that your heart is like the shepherd, right? And your limbs are like the sheep, right? You have to command them to stay clear from the gray area because your limbs, your hands, your feet, your eyes, your ears will eventually fall into haram if you get them close enough. Let me ask you all a question, just to put this into practical perspective. Is it halal or is it haram to just walk into a building where alcohol is being sold? Just walk into the building. Not very clear, right? Okay, let's say it's a bar. where people are selling alcohol. I just want to know if it's halal or haram to walk into the bar. What's the answer? The answer is لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. Most people don't know. Because it's what? It's a gray area, right? It's a gray area. Now think about the example the Prophet just gave. Let's say you walked into a bar, okay? And there's music, there's people dancing, there's people drinking alcohol, there's mingling of the sexes in ways that's not good, right? You're telling yourself, I just want to walk into the building. I'm not going to do anything haram, right? You're like that shepherd who's taking his sheep really close to that line that they shouldn't get to, okay? You may think you can protect yourself from haram, but eventually some drunk dude's going to come want to get in a fight with you, right? Some woman or some man is going to come flirt with you, right? You're going to come across some scene that's really obscene. You're going to fall into haram whether you want to or not, right? So sometimes when it's a question of I'm not sure, right? When it's a question of I'm not sure, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is saying, the person who avoids those situations, right, is protecting his dignity or protecting her dignity, right? Now this is just a small example, right? You can extrapolate this into many, many other examples, right? It could be a type of job that you do, where a lot of what you do is perfectly fine, but then some of what you do gets really, really close to doing something haram, right? It could be hanging out with friends, right? And a lot of what your friends do is halal, but a lot of what they do is also haram. And you're hanging out with them, you're eventually gonna fall into what they're doing, right? So the gray area is something that's problematic, right? Then he gives this metaphor, and he says, أَلَا وَإِنَّ كُلِّ مَلَكٍ حِمَامٍ. Every king has these lines. Every king, so you gotta think back in the day, like this is now 1400 years ago. We don't have these kings today, right? But you think back in the day, every one of these kings had these boundaries, right? You didn't get on this land without permission, right? But then he says this. Remember last time we talked about metaphors and the importance of being able to understand and think about issues in the way of a metaphor, right? We talked about metaphor quotient. Y'all remember that? That's a type of intelligence. It's a way of measuring intelligence, right? So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, every king has boundaries, but the boundaries of Allah, because Allah is the King of Kings, right? The boundaries of Allah are the things that He said are haram. Those are the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So the way you think about the haram, first and foremost, is the way you think about those boundaries that a king has laid across his land. Where there are soldiers, right, on the edges of those boundaries, and they're saying, you can't come past here. If you come past here, you'll be punished, right? Right? So those are the boundaries that Allah has laid. But even getting close to those boundaries, that's the gray area in life. That's the gray area where you're like, I'm not sure. Is this really halal or is this really haram? I'm not sure. Well, once you start getting really, really close, okay, that's when it's starting to be problematic. Then he says this. He says, and isn't it that in the human body there's a lump of flesh, and if it's sound, the whole body is sound, and that's the heart, right? Why does he give this metaphor? What does this have to do with the hadith that we just mentioned? What does a sound heart and a sound body have to do with halal being clear and haram being clear, and there's this gray area in between that's kind of like getting close to the boundaries of a king, right? What does it have to do with that? What it has to do with that is that your heart is like a king. This is how you think of it, right? And your limbs are like the soldiers, right? So when the king of a land is sound, and a king is righteous, and a king is just, and a king judges in the right way, and a king uses his powers in the right way, the whole land will be good. The whole land will be just. The whole land will be righteous, right? The same way, if a human heart is righteous, right, and it's sound, and it loves everything that Allah loves, and it hates everything that Allah hates, then what it commands the hands to do, it's soldiers, right? What it commands the eyes to do, what it commands the ears to do, what it commands the feet to do, will also be right and just and also be good, right? And knowledge of halal and knowledge of haram is essentially what all of that is about. And that is the basis of taqwa, right? So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gives us a teaching here. And within this teaching, he gives us a couple metaphors to understand this clearly and plainly, right? In that halal and haram, it's not simply a list of do's and don'ts, right? But it's actually an approach to life, right? You are approaching life with a sense of being careful, right? Because you know Allah is the King of Kings, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has boundaries, and those are the boundaries you don't get near. And your heart is also kind of like a king, right? And it's telling the rest of your body what you can and can't do. It's the one making judgments. It's the one, seeing things the way they really are, hearing things the way they are, just like a king actually does, right? And it's what determines what your day is going to be. So it's all interrelated. Now there's some kalam, there's some commentary about this hadith that I think is useful, right? What makes a heart sound? Practically speaking, what is it that makes a heart sound? The scholars, they say there's 5 things, right, that you should really think about to make your heart sound, right? So that everything else about your body is also sound. Because we know, physically speaking, when the physical heart is sound, the rest of the physical body is sound, right? And when the spiritual heart is sound, your entire psychology is sound, right? So what makes a spiritual heart sound? 5 things, okay? You want to write these down? These are 5 things that the scholars mention. 1 is qira'atul Quran bit-tadabbur. This is very important, right? Reading the Quran with contemplation. Reading the Quran with contemplation is one of the things that makes your heart sound, okay? We're all used to reading the Quran for what? For barakah, right? For blessings and rewards. And reading the Quran for blessings and rewards is important. But when was the last time you actually read the Quran, stopping after every verse and really thinking about what Allah said? Pondering. When was the last time you actually created a set of questions for yourself after reading the Quran? Right? When was the last time you read the Quran, you wrote down a few questions, and then you went and asked the Imam of the masjid, or you asked your parents, or you asked a friend or a scholar or someone who's really knowledgeable, hey, I read this in the Quran, I don't know what this means. When was the last time you had questions after reading the Quran? Right? Reading the Quran with tadabbur, with engagement, with reflection, with contemplation, this is what brings the heart to life. The Quran is like rain, right? And the heart is like a dead earth. What happens to a dead earth when it rains? It starts to come back to life, right? وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً مُبَارَكًا. This is what Allah says. We sent down blessed rain from the sky. The same word He uses for rain, He uses for the revelation of Quran. Inzal, right? So these verses of the Quran, they're like drops of rain, okay? And your heart is like a barren land where there's been a drought for many, many weeks and months. The only thing that's going to bring it back to life is a steady stream of rain, and that's what the Quran is, right? أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَتُصْبِحُ الْأَرْضُ مُخْضَرًّا. One of the verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this is, don't you see how Allah sends down rain from the sky and then all of a sudden the earth becomes full of greenery? The scholars say this is a metaphor for the human heart, right? When the human heart engages in the Quran, the greenery is that it comes back to life. It's a dead heart, but then it comes back to life, right? And so it's like a tree that starts to give fruit again. And the fruit are the good deeds, right? And the good deeds are what your limbs do. So when the heart is sound, the limbs are sound, the whole body is sound. So it's all related. The second thing that leads to a sound heart is ikhla'ul batan, emptying your stomach. One of the things that is really harmful for the human heart is constantly having a full stomach. This is why we fast, right? This is why we take some time to experience hunger, right? Because the more you empty your stomach of food, the more your heart becomes aware and alive. And the more you fill your stomach with food, the more your heart becomes dull, right? So emptying your stomach on a consistent basis, whether you fast twice a week or 3 times a month, or you make an effort every now and then, every Monday or Thursday, which is the days that Rasulullah ﷺ used to fast, to try and fast, That's only going to lead to a sounder heart, right? The third thing, qiyamul layl. Qiyamul layl, standing at night to pray. Inna nashi'at al-layl hiya ashaddu wata'an wa aqwa muqila. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the wee hours of the night, in the wee hours of the night, you are much more likely to contemplate and understand the words that you're saying, right? And you are much more receptive to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Inna laka fi nahari sabahan tawila. Throughout the day, you have all kinds of things that make you busy. You have all kinds of things that distract you. But in the wee hours of the night, no one's texting you, right? No one's sending you emails. Everything is turned off. It's dark outside. Things are still, right? So you are more receptive to the words of Allah. Number 4, tadarru'i in the sahar, right? Humbling yourself at the time of sahar. What is sahar? Right before the time of fajr. So making istighfar at this time is one of the times that's very, very important to draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to make your heart sound, because this is the time when the mercy of Allah descends to the lowest heaven, and it's a different experience. وَهُمْ بِالْأَسْحَارِ وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. Allah says in the Quran that the people who are the people of taqwa, in the wee hours of the morning, right before fajr. So sahar is right before fajr. They're always engaged in istighfar. So if you make some effort to engage in istighfar at that time, it's only going to lead to a sounder heart. And number 3 is mujalasatu ma'a salihin, right? Sitting with people of righteousness, i.e. your environment. Your environment has a huge effect on your heart, right? The people you hang around, the people you talk to, the people who you spend time with, they are constantly affecting you whether you like it or not, right? They are constantly affecting. Even if you are the influencer in the group, you're still getting influenced by people around you, right? وَالْبَلَدُ طَيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّ وَالَّذِي خَبُثَ لَا يَخْرُجُ إِلَّا نَكِدًا. Look at this example that Allah gives in the Quran. He says a good land, right, that has good soil, good plants come out of it, right? But a land that is full of bad soil, nothing but weeds come out of it, right? How does that apply to the idea of environment? When you're in a good environment, it's like being around good soil, right? Nothing but good will come out of you. When you're in a bad environment, it's like Rasulullah said, when you go buy perfume from someone, even if you don't buy it, you still come out smelling like perfume, right? What happens when you're around someone who's smoking? Even if you don't smoke, you still smell like smoke. So your environment affects you. So mujalasatu ma'a salihin is also something that's very important when it comes to having a sound heart. And in the end, having a sound heart is all that matters, right? يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. There's going to come a day when no amount of money, no amount of children will help you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only thing that will help you is if you have a heart that is sound. And he says salim. And salim means free of defects. Defects are sins when it comes to the heart, right? So when you have a heart that's like that, you've constantly made istighfar, you've humbled yourself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you spend time at night praying, right? You spend time fasting, you spend time with the Quran, you're purifying your heart. When you do this on a daily basis, right, your heart will want what Allah wants. Your heart will hate what Allah hates. And at that point, leaving the gray area becomes very, very easy, right? Leaving the gray area becomes very, very easy because you don't want to go near anything that earns the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is hadith number 6, right? Where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that our halal and our haram are very, very clear, and in between them there's this gray area, right? Majority of people don't know what it is, but if you want to protect your religion and you want to protect your dignity, stay away from it. The same way that a shepherd should stay away from that boundary in which their sheep are herding, because at some point they'll eventually cross that boundary. And all this has to do with the soundness of the human heart, right? Let me stop right here. Is there any questions about this hadith? No questions? Any comments? Anyone want to add something? Anyone want to take something away?
Not specifically the hadith, but why, I guess the question is, why does it always mention the heart as being the center of things when, medically speaking, emotions and everything, it's the brain.
Right. So the brother is saying, why does it mention the heart when emotions are, you also have emotions, your brain decides what is right and wrong and so on and so forth. This has to do with the relationship between qalb, aql, nafs, and hawa. 4 things. Okay? Qalb, aql, nafs, and hawa. Now this is a little bit complicated. You want to go into this?
I guess we can do it at the end.
It's a little bit complicated. And if you all want, we'll go into it. I need 5 minutes. Go into it or save it for later. What should we do? Keep going or go into this? Huh?
We have time for the other hadith.
Yeah, we'll have time for other hadith. So I'll just go into this briefly. Okay? Your qalb is the center of responsibility. If you want to think about this in terms of a metaphor, think about someone walking a dog. Alright? Someone walking a dog. Who here has ever walked a dog before? Not very many, because dogs are haram, right? Not if you're Maliki, right? But you've seen someone walk a dog, alright? There's 4 components to walking a dog. There's the person walking the dog. There's the leash. There's the dog. There's all the distractions that the dog has to deal with, right? The mailman, the cat, another dog, right? All these distractions, okay? I think this is a really helpful metaphor to understand the relationship between the heart, the qalb, the aql, the mind, right? The nafs and the hawa, all right? So the person walking the dog is the one that makes the decision where the dog goes, right? Let's say the dog goes and bites another dog. Who's responsible? The person walking the dog, right? The person walking the dog is deciding where the dog goes, decides how long that the dog walks for, decides what the dog gets to see, what it doesn't get to see, what it can go towards, what it can't go towards. Decision maker, right? Think of that as the qalb, the heart. It's making all the decisions. It's saying, you should go here today. You should go there today, right? So on and so forth. But the person walking the dog needs some kind of means to control the dog, right? What is the means in which this person uses to control the dog? The what? The leash. The leash is the aql. Aql in the Arabic language is often used for brain, right? It doesn't actually mean that. Aql means restraint. This is what it means in the Arabic language. The Prophet Muhammad says, "Aqilha wa tawakkal ala Allah." Someone asked him about a camel. Should I just leave it, trust in Allah, or tie it? And the Prophet says, tie it. But he says, "Aqilha." The same word, aql, that's used for mind, intelligence, he's using for a leash. So the aqil is the one who has restraint, right? The one who has restraint. Actually, this is why in Islam, intelligence is defined as your ability to self-control. And ignorance is often used in the Quran in a way that is used to describe people who have no self-control. Not your IQ, right? And so the people of ignorance are the people of jahiliyyah, jahl, right? Not because they don't know what's right and wrong, but because they have no self-control. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When people of ignorance approach you, right, the Ibadur Rahman, they say, take it easy. It's not that they don't know what they're doing. They have no self-control. Like they're patronizing you and they're riled up and they're trying to get you to fight, right? But the people of the Ibadur Rahman, Allah says in Surah Furqan, قَالُوا سَلَامًا. Even with their body language, they're just calm, cool, and collected, right? That's aql, that's restraint, right? So the aql is your ability to self-control, your ability to say no. And that is essentially what intelligence is in Islam, right? But what is it controlling? What is it pulling back on? Right? It's pulling back on the nafs. And that's like what the dog is. Okay? Because the nafs is not inherently good or bad. The nafs can be trained. You ever seen a dog that's like so well trained, it's not even on a leash? It's just like super. You seen like one of those dog whisperers? Somebody that's just got full control of their dog, you know? And the dog's not barking, right? The dog's not going this way, it's not going that way. It's just super well trained, right? That's a nafs that is trained. That's a nafs that is mutma'inna, right? But then you have other dogs, they're just out of control. Go after this, go after that, bark at this thing, bark at that thing. They're the ones walking the owner, right? That's the heart that's enslaved by the nafs. They're the ones walking the owner, right? So some dogs are not trained at all. So some nafs, some nufus, some souls are not trained at all. They just go after everything. Any temptation, any desire that's after, they'll just go after, right? So your nafs can be trained, right? And Allah talks about different nufus in the Quran. Some that are very well trained and some that are not trained at all, right? And this is what purification of the nafs is all about. The hawa is the desire, the transient desire. Hawa also means wind in Arabic. So it's like something that comes and goes transiently, right? The hawa is like that mailman. It's like that cat, right? It's like that candy bar you want to eat, right? Or that show you want to watch. What you allow your nafs to do and what you don't allow it to do, that's what all of Sharia is about, right? That's what all halal and haram is. So at some point, Allah says, pull it back, right? And then other times, Rasulullah ﷺ says, in this situation, this is halal, you can let it go. Allah says in the Quran, listen to this. This brings the whole thing together. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّي وَنَهَى النَّفْسِ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. As for the one who fears Allah, this is the heart. Allah is speaking to the heart here. The one who fears Allah, right? And fears standing before Allah on the Day of Judgment. وَنَهَى النَّفْسِ. And they pull their nafs back. From what? From what? What does the ayah say? On what? On hawa. From all these distractions that are around them. They pull their nafs back. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Paradise is promised for that person. Right? Paradise is promised for that person. Halal is when you let the nafs go. Haram is when you pull it back. And the halal is clear, and the haram is clear. Now there's this gray area in between. The Prophet says, if you go ahead and pull your nafs back there too, pull it back. Restrain it, okay? You've protected your dignity and your honor. And the only one that's going to do that is a heart that is sound. ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله. The heart that's sound is the one who's walking that dog knows what they're doing. Right? They're not going to let that dog go anywhere where they are going to be in trouble as a result of that. So you got to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us desires, that's natural. He's given us emotions, that's natural, right? He's given us inclinations, that's natural. But He's also given us a mechanism through which we can control them and decide when to indulge and when not to indulge. And knowing when to indulge and when not to indulge, that is all what the halal and haram is. That is what taqwa is, right? And it is incumbent upon every Muslim to know what that is. And if you have a heart that is sound, then you're going to be pulling back at the right time and letting go at the right time. That is a heart that is sound, right? By the way, this is not my metaphor a little bit, but Imam Ghazali gives this metaphor in Ihya Ulumuddin, but he uses a horse instead of a dog because they didn't walk dogs. Okay? So I've shifted it just a little bit because none of you ride horses, but you all seen someone riding a dog, okay? Walking a dog, all right? So it's important to understand. Does everyone understand this? Does everyone get this metaphor?
I have a question.
Yes.
Between nafs and the heart, would be an overlap or
Yeah, speak up, brother. Speak up.
is the heart and the nafs is they totally distinct entities or is there an overlap?
No, these are distinct entities. These are distinct entities. They're spoken about in distinct entities in the Quran.
And
Now,
more explanation for me between adult heart and adult nafs and nafs of a child and the heart of a child. Things do change from childhood to adult.
yes, things do change. The way to understand this is that the heart in the Arabic language, you gotta stay in the Arabic language to understand. The minute you go to English, things get less clear. But in the Arabic language, qalb yataqallab. So the nature of the heart is yataqallab, flips, constantly flips. Okay? Umar, radiallahu anhu, was one of the worst enemies of Islam. Worst enemies of Islam. Almost instantaneously, flip. After reading a few verses of Surah Taha, right? Heart totally flipped, right? And in Hadith number 4, we're going to talk about someone who's lives their entire life as a person of Jannah, right? And in the last moments of their life, flip. And vice versa as well, right? And that person will go to hellfire, and the person who's acted their whole life as if they're going to go to hellfire, the last moments of their life, they flip and they go to Jannah, right? The heart is something that can flip. This is why Rasulullah says, Ya muqallib al-qulub thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Oh, flipper of the hearts, put our hearts sound on the deen. Because this is the nature of the heart. One moment you have Iman, the next moment you have doubt. One moment you feel like you're a spiritual high, the next moment you feel like you're depressed. That's the heart for you. That's how it was created, right? And it was created like that so you can constantly seek your stability in Allah. The nafs is different. The nafs isn't something that flips. The nafs is something that gets trained. It's something that gets trained, right? And it's something that has a sense of peace or regret, right? So there are nufus that have been trained only to seek bad things out, only to seek out their bad hawa, their bad temptations, right? An-nafs that's ammaratun bisu, Allah says in the Quran. There's certain nufus, nafs, right? They've been trained a little bit. So they understand that doing something bad leads to regret, right? That's a nafs that's, lawama, Allah says in the Quran, right? It does something bad, but then it feels regret. There are other nufus that have been trained so well through the spiritual practices of Islam that they are in a state of itmitnan, peace and security, right? So, nafsul mutma'inna, Allah says in the Quran, Surah Fajr, right? So there are different gradations and levels to which the nafs can be trained, right? But all of these things, right, they're not entirely, this is not an entirely clear science, right? We just have what Allah has told us, what the Prophet has told us. We have metaphors like this, and we can understand what we can understand as a result of that. At the end of the day, Allahu A'lam, right? Allah knows best. But for the purpose of this hadith, the take-home message is this, right? Islam isn't simply like a list of do's and don'ts, and you go about the whole day like, okay, here's the do's and here's the don'ts and everything's fine. A lot of times life doesn't work like that. Life has a lot of gray area in it. It has a lot of doubt in it, right? And we're not scholars, right? So we're not going to know what the right answer is, right? The principle you apply is keep yourself safe in those situations, right? And the way you keep yourself safe is you just avoid it. And that leads us to hadith number 11, if anyone's following along, all right? Hadith number 11 helps us answer a question, okay? Because you tell someone this hadith, and they're like, okay, where do I draw the line, right? Where do I draw how much, like, let's go back to that example of someone walking in a bar, okay? Some people won't even walk on the same street in which a bar is on. Some people will walk on the same street, but they just won't walk into the building. Some people will walk into the building, but they just won't drink alcohol, right? All these are different lines that people have written for themselves, right? And so, where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line? This is always a question that gets asked, how do I know where to draw the line? And this is what's beautiful about Islam and about the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, is that it combines objective and subjective, right? It combines logic and it combines evidence with what you personally feel and know what is right and wrong. Because listen to the next hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ that's actually narrated by Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, right, the grandson of Rasulullah ﷺ, where he teaches us a very, very important principle in Islam that helps us draw that line where he says, "Da' ma yaribuk ila ma la yaribuk." Leave what is doubtful for what has no doubt. Leave what is doubtful for what is not doubtful. I.e., hold on to what you're sure about and leave the things you're not sure about. Right? This is a principle upon which much of Islam has been built. Right? And so let's go back to that line here in a second, but I just want to talk about the various applications of this principle. First of all, it's a religious principle. It's a jurisprudential principle. We have a principle in Islam that says, Al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak, right? Certainty is not removed by doubt. What does that mean? For example, if you have wudu, okay, and then all of a sudden you're not sure whether you have wudu or not, right? Do you go make wudu again? You were sure you had wudu, now you're not sure you have wudu. Do you go make wudu again?
No.
No, you do not make wudu again, right? Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says in a hadith, right? He says, if any of you made wudu, right, and then it was made confusing to him, akharaja am la, like did something leave you or not? Like did you pass gas or not? فَلَا يَخْرُجَنَّ حَتَّى يَسْمَعُ صَوْتًا أَوْ يَجِدُ رِيحًا. For sure they should not leave to go make wudu again unless they hear a sound or they smell something, right? So you're sure at that point. But until you're sure, you stay with what you were sure about before, which is that you had wudu, right? So it's a jurisprudential principle. Certainty is not removed by doubt, right? But it's also a theological principle, right? Alhamdulillah, Islam is built on a creed that is clearly certain in its principles. There is no God but God, right? Right? It's not built on the premise of some event that happened 2,000 years ago and we're not sure exactly what happened, or did this happen, and then an entirely complicated creed is built on top of that. No. It's built on certainty. Your faith is first and foremost built on certainty. And there's a hadith in which Rasulullah ﷺ says that a person will ask themselves, a question will come to them, right? Who created this? Who created that? Right? Man khalaqa hada, man khalaqa hada. Right? And you're going to say to yourself, Allah created this and Allah created that. And then what's going to happen? Shaitan's going to come to you. You know what Shaitan's going to say? Who created Allah? What happens? Doubt. So what do? In that moment, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, you seek refuge in Allah and you go back to what you're sure of. La ilaha illallah. Don't bother with the question. Right? Because it's only going to lead you to deception. Right? Allah has no creator. Right? But you can't apply logic to that. Allah is beyond logic. Right? So it has theological principles. وَعْبُدَ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينُ. Right? Worship your Lord until certainty comes to you. Right? Until actually what some ulama says is death. Because that's the point of certainty. That's when you become absolutely certain. You see the angel come take your soul. Right? So certainty is a theological principle. It's a hadith principle. Right? Our ulama of hadith broke hadith down in a way to which they could tell what is weak and not certain, what is sort of weak, right? What is made up, what is somewhat strong, and what is absolutely certain, mutawatir sahih, right? And religion is only based on those things that are mutawatir sahih, absolutely certain, right? So our whole religion is based on certainty. Early ulama, the very, very early scholars of Islam, they realized that logic, studying logic, even the logic of Aristotle and the logic of Plato, and translating these works into works that were Islamically appropriate, was incumbent upon the scholar or the student of Islam. Because logic helps you reach certainty in your conclusion. If A equals B, B equals C, A must equal C, right? We can now apply some of these logistical principles to our life. And our life and our religion can be based on certainty. So it's a religious principle in multiple different ways. It's also a civilizational principle, right? It's a civilizational principle. You make decisions in life the same way, right? And if you're an engineer in Islam, if you're a Muslim engineer, you're going to build that bridge upon foundations of certainty. If you're a doctor, you're going to treat that patient in a way in which you're as certain as possible in which the treatment is going to work, right? You're always leaving doubt for certainty. Leaving doubt for certainty. Leaving doubt for certainty. Right? So it's a civilizational principle as well. Now when it comes to drawing that line, because that's what we were talking about just now, right? How do you draw that line? When it comes to drawing that line, it's important that you apply this internally within yourself, right? Because in other narrations of this hadith, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, فَإِنَّ الصِّدْقَ طَمْأَنِينَةٌ وَالْكَذَبْ رِيبَةٌ. Internally, honesty and truthfulness, right, leads to a sense of serenity and tranquility. But lying leads to doubt. And in another hadith, al-ithmu ma haka fi nafsi. You're not sure what is a sin and what's not a sin. Even if people give you a fatwa that something is fine, deep down inside, you know that it's a problem, and it haka fi nafsi, right? It's bothering you, right? It leads to doubt. So oftentimes, doing something, right, wherein afterwards you don't feel good about it. You feel doubt. You feel insecure, right? The opposite of serenity, the opposite of tranquility, right? Understand that your nafs has been given understandings of right and wrong. وَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَهَا. It's been given the inspiration of piety and impiety. Listen to that feeling. Listen to that gut feeling, right? Leave that for what you have a feeling of certainty and tranquility in. Oftentimes, that's what the haqq is. And this is what's beautiful about our deen. Because you see, it's combining objective logic and objective evidence with personal subjective feelings and intuitions. That gut feeling you have, that intuition you have is real. Listen to it. That internal sense of discomfort you have is real. Listen to it. But that's not the only thing you use to make a decision, right? You also have the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the teachings of the scholars and the ijma' of the scholars, right? And Islam brings the two together. It's not a robotic religion that's just based on equations that you plug in, nor is it simply a subjective religion that's only based on feelings, right? It's something that brings the two together. So it's a foundational principle. دَعَ مَا يَرِيبُكَ إِلَى مَا لَا يَرِيبُكَ. Right? Leave what you're not certain about for what you're certain about. Right? So let's stop right here. Is there any questions about this? Any comments? Any ideas? Anyone want to add something? Anyone want to take something away? Can't be that clear. Actually, it is very clear. This is from the Jawami al-Kalam of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's very, very clear. So it's 3:05 right now. Do we have time for one more hadith? Maybe 10 more minutes? Does that work? So this next hadith is hadith number 30. And all of these hadith are interrelated and they all complement each other, right? And again, we will complete all of that hadith at the end of this. Jurthum ibn Nashir is the narrator of this hadith. And he says, Rasulullah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ فَرَدَ الْفَرَائِدِ. Right? وَحَدَّدَ حُدُودًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made incumbent certain obligations for you. And He has made as a punishment certain punishments for not doing those obligations or for doing something He didn't ask you to do. Right? وَسَكَتَ عَنِ الْأَشْيَاءِ وَحَرَّمَ الْأَشْيَاءَ فَلَا تَنْتَهِكُوهَا. Right? And He's prohibited things, don't get near them, right? وَسَكَتَ عَنْ الْأَشْيَاءِ رَحْمَةً لَكُمْ غَيْرَ نَسْيَانٍ. And He's been quiet about other things. He didn't mention other things